When an animal looks up at the sky at night, what does it see? It sees America's most omnipresent podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum. Pretend that was me hitting a fridge.
Oh, man. I was going to say, I'm Ben Sheets, and I'm every refrigerator's number one enemy.
Hello, and I'm Cleveland Mosier, and is your refrigerator running away?
better
You better go slap it.
A frosty start to tonight's episode. We keep it chill around here.
I'm laughing so hard, my mountainsides are aching.
Oh, no.
Fuck off. That's not the tone we need to start this.
Sorry, is that too much black comedy for you?
Well, this week was a Patreon pick, and tonight's film was chosen by our newest honorary pod boy. Zach recommended a film called Black Mountainside from 2014, directed by, apologies to this man in advance for the way I'm about to butcher his last name, but it was written and directed by Nick Zostakowski.
Nick S.
Nick S. We're just going to call it, we're on a first name basis. We're just going to call him Nick.
It has people in it. No one we recognize.
No. Well, I mean, this is, Zach, what Zach has done is given us, I think, a pretty deep cut. I can't remember the last time we've talked about a movie that none of us have even heard of. Like, even when we go into movies that none of us have seen, we've at least seen the trailers or heard of the movie or something.
Or have cult renown of some capacity?
Yeah, this is, this one,
We're going to first, like, a small director, like, probably first time film, I would say. Like, if I had to
It
guess.
looked like it on Letterboxd. It
Yeah,
looked like it was his first feature.
like a lower budget production. And frankly, I wish we did more of these on the show. I love this.
gotta get some deep cuts in there.
I love this niche.
I will say it's a tricky minefield to navigate because a lot of new hyper indie, horror movies are shit.
Yes.
But like this one,
I watch most
pretty good.
Feel that.
I thought, it was actually pretty good. There were faults to it, sure. It's
yeah, I thought it was decent.
we'll talk about that more. It's almost minimal to a fault.
I would say just minimal to a fault. Minimal to some faults.
The thing is, you can do minimal with a small budget movie like this.
Sure.
But you have to give a little bit more than they gave.
Well,
the fact that there were like no close-ups at all.
That's the whole thing. We'll come back to that.
We'll
'cause
get
there's-
into that.
Yeah, for sure.
The premise of this movie, because I'm guessing most of our listeners probably haven't heard of it either. It's set in in the Arctic, in Canada. An archaeological team is excavating some old artifacts. They lose contact with the outside world. Strange things and paranoia ensue. I was actually just thinking what this movie kind of reminds me of in a lot of ways is Seder.
A little bit.
But with kind of the opposite approach. I feel like this movie would, or rather this story would be better served as like a novella or something, because like the filmmaking is, as you mentioned, minimal, but like it is clinical. There is very little. Saying there's very little artistry sounds harsher than
Artistic
I mean it.
flourishes.
Yeah, whereas something like Seder is a similar kind of movie, isolated wilderness, like weird supernatural stuff happening, people going crazy. But Seder is a film that has like very little dialogue at all. It's all about visual storytelling and atmosphere, and this movie is like the opposite. It doesn't seem to care about like being cinematic at all. It's very dialogue heavy.
Yeah.
It's very talky. So a lot of it is just wide static shots of people in different rooms talking.
Yeah, and we get a few breaks from that. We get a few, honestly, kind of incredible long takes.
Especially
You know.
towards the end. Yeah, there's one very impressive long take.
I have some good praise for this movie as well.
However,
like, for sure.
I think, like you said, it's just very clinical, and I think of a comparison to, like, The Thing with this movie. Arctic paranoia.
This movie wants to be the thing
if
in
we're
many
on
ways.
well, and see, that's if we're on comparing this film to other movies, the first one that comes to my mind is Sea Fever, Epic Pictures movie Sea Fever, a company I now work for. But it is very much reminiscent of that, in that it is largely inspired by The Thing. Like, there's a lot to that plot. I think I prefer this movie to Sea Fever.
I do
Sure,
too.
yeah,
For sure.
100%. I will say,
But-
for example, with The Thing, like, it intersperses moments of tension with a great score by Carpenter and Ennio Morricone, which helps build the tension. This movie doesn't really have any music at all.
No,
And-
I think there's some, like, sort of ambient
Stings.
It's
ambient and stings, and
Yeah.
whereas I think that there are a lot of other like films of this budget and quality that would, I think push for more atmosphere. And I think that's, if I had to really pick one thing that I would really like to see more of in this movie, it would be that.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah,
atmosphere.
I agree.
Like, I think like Hagasusa, for instance, was like on a budget that was
This reminded me a lot of Hagazusa.
really,
too.
because
Yeah.
Hagasusa, it's minimal, but like the one thing it does well in my eyes is atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great atmosphere film, and like very little less. It's vibes, But like, this movie doesn't really bring the vibes. It's not here. It's not trying to bring the vibes either. Like,
Yeah. Very different goals. And when I say this movie reminds me of Hagazusa, I mean more in being a super low budget, like, first time filmmakers sort of high concept idea that, like, feels like it has a lot of stuff that it wants to say, but maybe doesn't quite know the best way, the most adept way to do it.
Yeah, and I would even, compare it to things like In the Earth in some ways, in that it's very environmental horror. But the thing is, this movie puts the environment very much in the background.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we get bits and pieces. This is an archaeological dig team, uncovering an ancient artifact of sorts.
Yeah, some kind of structure.
That is kind of an anomaly to the area. And that alone is very interesting.
Yeah.
But, again, that is put very much in the background.
yeah,
for
but
much
what
of
do
the
they
film.
do with it?
The film
what do
doesn't
they do
seem
with it?
interested in showing us any of that stuff, but it does seem very interested in telling us about it.
It's so weird.
And that's why I feel like this movie, like this story, would be better served as like a short story or a novella, like in a written medium, where you can get all of this information that they're talking at us, but let your mind sort of make it a little bit more interesting, by having some of that creativity.
That's an interesting point. I agree. I think I would have gotten more out of just reading the script than watching the movie.
I like a lot of the like narrative concepts of this movie.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot of good ideas, but I think it kind of struggles to show them in like a way that's engaging.
Yep.
It is just like so much of it is just very bland shots of people talking and like without much variety, not a lot of cuts, very long takes. It's just like scene after scene after scene of this for
And it's not long takes of like carefully like plotted out cinematography or like these blocked out shots. It's usually like long takes of like the helicopter at the beginning, for instance. Like the helicopter, we see the helicopter fly in, land, the people disembark,
They unload all the shit.
Unload all the shit, walk off, and then the helicopter gets up and we watch it fly away back out over the mountains.
Gotta get their money's worth.
Clearly it's because shit. Exactly. They dropped some serious cash on a helicopter. Like they want to show it. They want to get the most out of the shot. How cool is it? We got a helicopter, and they are very excited to show us that they got a helicopter. And I don't blame them. Like especially at that scale, that is an impressive feat. Like from a filmmaking perspective, from a general audience perspective.
But it's like while we're watching it, why do we care?
Right, exactly.
We've all seen a helicopter.
Which is my general audience perspective.
From an editor standpoint, that's not the only time they do that. Like, for example, there's multiple times in the movie where someone is called in on the radio and they hang up and then they run over to wherever the action
It's always,
is.
And this is a fault. This is also a problem with the script, which is, that like half our scenes, if not more than like half our scenes, start with person gets called on the radio. Hey, you need to come down here. It's important. Click. Or hey, you need to come here. There's no time. Click. Hey, you need to come down here. I'll just describe it to you when you get here. Click. You can get away with that a couple times, but most of the scenes start with that.
And then click, and then the character who was talking on the radio sits there while we have to wait for the person coming from wherever they are in the camp to get to the location. You know?
It's just pass the time.
It's like, no, we can cut this. Like we can cut to them then entering. We don't have to sit there in silence while they run across the camp.
If you need that amount of time, if you want there to be a sense of chronology, give me a shot of the ice dripping off of some leaves or something.
Get some
cutaway.
B-roll.
Give me something to look at.
This film has 0 cutaways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. And again, to which is what Ben had mentioned earlier. And I think let's just go ahead and talk about it because we need to go into this one at full. So a big point that I think first really caught my eye when we started watching this was when they were looking at the object that they were there for. So it's an archaeological dig site. This team is there. When I'm describing this to you, I'm sure dear viewer or whoever, I'm sure the first thing you were thinking of is something Indiana Jones or something even in the Guyver, or something that's 2, I guess Dark Hero, I guess is the name of that one. But because it does use a good map painting. Even that Sentai film, you're thinking there's going to be some sort of a shot there, and it's cool. It's a low budget movie. They don't have a map painting. That's fine. So someone made an artifact. They did get an artist in some capacity to make a large tablet that is partly submerged in the soil that they're slowly digging away around, and they set up the set so it looks like an archaeological dig site. And we never once get a close-up of the thing. It's always at a distance. And, not at an epic distance. It's, mid-range. It's kind of right there. We can look at it, but, we never get to, see the thing.
Well, the worst offender is when they have something on, the table, and he's, pointing down to it.
Yeah.
And
he's describing, the carvings and the symbols on it, but we never get a cutaway to a close-up of what they're looking at.
It's literally just out of frame. I was making the joke during the movie that it almost felt like they didn't account for the widescreen bars.
For the letterbox.
It got letterboxed out. But even if the letterboxing wasn't there and we got more of the frame beneath, it's still so far away. It's a wide shot. Yeah. And no close-ups in this movie.
That moment isn't the only time they do that. It's multiple times where they're describing something that they're standing there looking at. They're describing it for the audience's benefit.
And the descriptions are cool.
I mean, it sounds interesting, and they're looking at it, but the camera is so removed from it and never cuts to a close-up, so we can see that they're looking at an old piece of pottery or whatever, and they're describing what's on it, but cut to it. Let me see it.
Yeah. And I think you can do clinical, distant films like this. The thing is, a lot of times with films like this, the music does a lot of the heavy lifting of atmosphere.
Sure.
I think of something like The Lodge, where a lot of the shots are very distant and it's very detached almost. but the music really carries it and brings in that atmosphere and brings everything together.
Yeah. I mean, The Lodge has, like, a good mix, too, and, like,
Sure, it's not as excessively distant as, like, having zero close-ups.
Well, yeah, and then the cool
anything.
thing that the Lodge does is that, like, the little girl in the Lodge has the dollhouse version of the house, like, in her bedroom. So, like, throughout the film, we get, like, lots of close-ups from, like, inside the dollhouse, and then it'll, like, cut to that set in the movie. So it's like there is a sense of, like, drilling down on detail and, like, showing what needs to be seen, especially for a story that's revolving around, like, uncovering mysterious artifacts and stuff like that, and, like, sort of unprecedented discoveries. Like, that kind of stuff you can show us. Like, you don't have to show us the monster or whatever. You can keep that mysterious, but, like, if you got artifacts with, like, weird symbols and, like, paintings of, like, animal gods and stuff, like, for the love of God, show it. Like, I'm just so curious, like, what's the deal here? Like,
What's the deal with artifacts?
did they not have, like, a like prop designer or something who could do that kind of stuff, so they just had to find, like, some old looking pottery and, like, keep the camera away from it so we couldn't see that it doesn't have the things on it that they're describing? Like,
Well, see, but what's weird is, like, then change your description a little bit, you know? Like, this movie did seem very, like, by the book, like, okay, we're reading the lines as they are off of the script. Like, there didn't seem to be a lot of improv or whatever, largely because, like, the actors didn't really, like, seem like that capable of it.
The characters are all researchers and scientists, so, like, it's very, like, it's all very dry.
But they're dry, and honestly, I started to get the characters confused a little bit.
Yeah,
like, they're
almost
not
all the time.
particularly distinctive.
They're dry scientists and they all have beards, and it was a little difficult from time to time. Like, you can tell the one kind of focal character because
he has Kurt
he
Russell
is
hair.
Kurt Russell from The Thing. Like, well, he's got the sweater too. Like, they just, like, completely decked him with, like, we're gonna make you look like Kurt Russell. Like, that was the intent. And
Except he doesn't have any of the, like, on-screen physicality or personality of Kurt Russell.
charisma.
Like, he's like the shortest guy in this group of guys. So he's, like, kind of diminutive, and, like, he just...
But you can change just by how you shoot, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Like, you can fix that with cinematography.
But it does feel like he's supposed to kind of be like the Kurt Russell analog, and, like, his haircut is... I found it distracting because as we've said, like, it just is the same haircut that Kurt Russell has in The Thing, and that was a haircut that
was in style
in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, nobody has hair like that anymore, so it's just, like, this weird anachronism. But again, he doesn't have any of the charisma of Kurt Russell, so he just reminded me of Michael McDonald. Like, that's all I got. I was getting from him more than Kurt Russell.
But yeah, the camera, like, very rarely even, like, shoots from the hip. It's largely, like, shoulder, like, shots, which give it, like, a made-for-TV kind of feel.
Conversations aren't even in, like, your typical shot reverse shot. Like, it's you know what it feels like. It feels like every scene, all they got was a master shot.
Yep.
And the whole movie is all the master shots edited together.
It almost has a stage play kind of vibe to it.
It does.
Just because you're always taking these single shots of everything happening in sort of a tableau in front of you almost.
Yep, totally.
You know, and you don't get back and forths or cutaways or anything to break that up. It's just what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm. And this movie really needs something to break it up because, like, even if the subject matter is interesting, which I think it generally is, because because so many scenes are just a master shot of people talking, it does just feel like you're just sort of sitting there, like, eavesdropping on, like, some dudes at the library talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like it needs something to engage the viewer a little bit more in some of that stuff.
Because here's the thing, right? Like I love dry stuff. I grew up watching like almost exclusively PBS. You know, and like Nova specials and other things. I am notoriously like a Star Trek nerd to the point that annoys both of you. I love dry science shit. I go out of my way to watch YouTube channels of dry science bullshit, and I think that you have to be very careful about how you approach that for, you know, like a general audience or whatever else like that. And I think this movie, like, I do kind of respect this film in that, like, it kind of feels like it doesn't care about general audiences to a degree where, like, is a detriment in some circumstances, and also in other circumstances, I kind of respect it.
Again, in the exact
like,
same...
they don't care. Like, they're not trying to do that. They're just trying to tell their story, and, like, that's kind of cool.
In the exact same way that films like Hagazusa and Seder don't care about general audiences.
Yeah, but I think the difference is with both of those, especially Seder, for personal biases.
Sure.
Of course.
Bias
but
away.
I think they use the medium more.
Yes.
You know, I think,
Yes.
like we just
Yes, I
mentioned,
agree.
this film probably would work better as a stage play or a novella, you know?
Yeah.
Just because the way it's shot caters it towards
It doesn't utilize the medium, like, almost at all.
There's something to that utilitarian like aspect of it that I would appreciate. I do appreciate to some capacity, but like I would appreciate more if I think it had ramped up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. By nature, it's very slow. Before we get into that, while we're still on the subject of how it's shot and presented, like over halfway through, there's a shot. It's just like one of the characters, like in his bed, like just sort of sitting up, smoking a cigarette, and like light is spilling in through the window and kind of like highlighting his face, and like the smoke is like catching the light.
Kind of noir.
And it was like, yeah, and it's the kind of thing that like in most movies I wouldn't give a second thought to, but it was like in this movie, like that shot happened, I was like, Kino, you know? It's like, whoa, this is the most cinematic shot that's been in this fucking movie so far. And it's just like, it was just like, whoa, one really nice, simple, but like nicely framed and lit shot with like some atmospheric perspective from the cigarette that he was smoking.
Finally.
It's like, it's so basic, but in this movie, like that stood out. It's like, what the fuck? Cinema.
Yeah.
And there are a few of those.
Well, and on top of that,
but
there were continuity errors as well, or at least like not super bad, and like largely forgivable. But one that stood out to me was there's a shot of a guy talking briefly, and he puts his hand up over his head. He's sort of sitting at a desk, and his elbow is propped on the desk, and he puts his hand up in front of his head, and the camera cuts back, and his arm is in like a very different position, and he's leaning forward in a very different way, or is he leaning back instead of forward? And then he's surrounded by people,
yeah,
and it was just very apparent that, and it kind of to the degree like it kind of jarred me a little bit, like that it was in the same scene, you know, like because his arm was like in a different position, but like he's still in the shot, like in the next shot. So it didn't feel very clean, and again, like a cutaway would have solved that. Like with I think like good editing and, you know, on set getting enough cutaways, because like I do wonder, it's like it felt so utilitarian that like I do wonder like how much.
That's why you gotta get coverage when you shoot.
Yeah,
gotta get coverage.
Well, and
Get coverage.
that's the thing too, because it's shot so clinically. The things that stand out are, you know, continuity errors. You know,
Right.
like they stand out because we don't have much else to grasp. So if things don't align perfectly, they pronounce themselves much more.
Yeah, I caught one where like dude sits down at the desk and like puts a cigarette in his mouth and goes to light it, and it's like the end of that cigarette has been lit before. It's like they did a shot where he sat down, lit it, and they're like, okay, cut, we need to do that again. And so they like put the cigarette out, and then instead of grabbing a different cigarette for the new take, they
From
just
a pack. Yeah, come on.
used the same
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I noticed when the guy was using the stress ball, when it cut to the wider shot of him, he had it in the other
In the
hand.
opposite hand.
And then it would go back.
And again, a cutaway.
yeah.
That's all you need for
Exactly.
any of those is a cutaway.
Yeah. I wonder what the editor was even working with in a movie like this.
So when our protagonist first gets to the base, earlier I mentioned this, but when the guy first gets there, there's a really apparent moment that brings up how they kept the script. And that is the guy leading him around says, like, repeatedly says how much of a shithole this place is that they're in. But the cabin looks nice. It looks like resort-esque. It's small and like it's not very big, but it's not itty bitty either.
Yeah.
Like it looks like a reasonable space to live, like while you're working on like a dig site, and it sure as fuck beats a tent.
I'm willing
Like-
I'm willing to forgive that, just in the sense that, like, at this point that character has been out here for like over a year. So
He's jaded.
he's jaded, whatever. What I found more jarring in that scene, maybe jarring is a little harsh, but is how many times in that one scene, and one shot really, because a lot of these scenes are just like one wide shot, that character says how shitty something in the room is, or how shitty the room is. It's just like over and over and over again. He's like, yeah, this place is pretty shitty, but you know, it could be worse. There's the bed over there. The bed's kind of a piece of shit, but you know, like, it'll do. And that there's a vent next to the bed. You can hear the laundry and it gets loud. So that's pretty shitty, but there's some like warm air that comes up from the laundry room. So it's actually not that shitty.
Yep.
It's like, whoa, man. Thesaurus.
Mix it up a
Yeah.
little.
Or whatever. Yeah. I mean, geez, that's real nitpicky, but I mean, this is the kind of movie where it's easy to hone in on these little things, because just frankly, there's not a lot going on for most of the movie.
Yeah. Well, I will say, you know, that's a good segue into like the actual story and
Yeah.
concepts going on, because that stuff I think works pretty well. Mm-hmm. I think that stuff is pretty cool.
Praise time.
You know, it's, as we mentioned earlier, it's very Thing-esque in terms
Yeah.
of, you know, Arctic paranoia. There's sort of a force.
There's an entity or something.
You know,
Cool one too.
cephalopods, octopi, octopodes.
They didn't do anything with that. We don't have to get into that yet.
I'm kind of okay with that to a degree.
But, you know, I think in a way that idea of having like brain octopodes that make you see
Cephalopods, yeah.
ancient ones
Yeah.
is awesome. That's an awesome concept.
It's very Lovecraftian. This reminded me in concept way more than execution again, but I got a lot of At the Mountains of Madness vibes. You know, research team in a very cold, isolated place, except this time it's the Arctic instead of the Antarctic, uncovering strange artifacts that sort of like drive them mad a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the way it builds a sense of dread is pretty good. You know, like they're 100 miles from the nearest town or reserve.
Yeah, there's an indigenous peoples reservation. I almost said Native Americans, but they're in Canada, so Native Canadians. There's a reservation 100 miles south, and that is one thing, is like all of the workers at the camp are like indigenous people, and then like early in the
But
movie,
we never really
they
see 'em?
Yeah, not really. I mean, we kind of see a couple of them like walking around, like sort of like brushing stuff off the dig site, because you know, they're the ones who are unearthing it. But yeah, I mean, then it's just like one of the talky bits is they come in as like, oh, all of our workers left in the middle of the night. But, oh, did they go south back to the reserve? No, they went north. But we're the farthest point north. And we're the farthest north.
I
base.
was
There's
expecting
nothing
them to
north of
come
us.
back or something,
Yeah.
or us to see something of that.
That would have been cool.
I mean, I
Anything would have been cool.
don't mind that they just kind of walk off into the wilderness.
Well,
Yeah,
I
just
think
disappear.
that's really
like,
creepy in and
Yeah.
of itself, you know?
But they didn't show it. Like, it would have been cool if they'd shown it. Like, we'd seen, like, their group, like, leave in the night and just, like, walk into the woods and just, that's it. You know? Like, I agree then. But, or if we'd seen more of them set up to begin with, like, there had been some breakfast interactions, you know, or just, like, sitting down at mealtime, and they were, like we met these characters in some capacity. Again, I get it. There's a budget. Like, clearly you're working with limited cast, limited, you know, whatever. But, like, and I get that, but still,
Well,
like,
I
it is a
think-
bummer because, like, we don't get to see these people, like, walk into the woods, or we just get to hear from it, and everything else in this movie is heard from.
Well, I think that's one of the examples of the clinical nature of this movie kind of undermining it, because we do get a little build up with the murdered cat.
Yeah.
Right? The cat is murdered in front of this
in front of the structure.
Structure.
Which again,
And-
we don't really see. Like it, we see it.
We see
but
it
it's
from
like
the
a
same
wide
distance
shot,
we'd previously seen.
yeah.
and it's like you can't
The
tell.
artifact.
You can't tell what it is until two of the characters walk into frame and say, "What is that?" Oh, that's so and so's cat. It's like I wouldn't have known what the fuck that was
Yeah.
otherwise. Again, like telling us instead of showing us. But anyway,
Yeah.
you were saying.
Well, no, I think that's exactly the point, because that would have given you a chance to build these characters more. That's just one example of them, you know, adding another plot point with these characters where you could dwell on that just a little bit to give us a little texture to these characters.
Yeah, we never see the reaction of the dude who owns that cat. They find the dead cat, and then like one of the workers
We
is
also
like,
never saw the cat beforehand.
no, we did. While they're playing poker, it hops up on the table and they pet it. And then
Oh,
the
okay.
guy, and then the guy comes in and is like, "Oh, cat, get off the table."
sorry,
so
I forgot, yeah.
so we did see that.
Well, that's good.
But it's like, yeah, they find the body, and then it cuts to like them talking to one of the workers who's like, "Oh yeah, I saw so and so kill the cat." And then they call so and so on the radio, and they're like, "Hey, so and so, did you kill so and so's cat?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, well, why did this so and so say you did it? He's like, I don't know, I didn't do it.
And then he hangs up and he's like, well, he didn't do it.
Well, he didn't do it. And it's like, and then that's just kind of dropped, and it's like, okay, I guess it's not the most important thing, but like, I'm a cat owner, I'm a cat daddy. If I was on this like research base and I brought my beloved cat to keep me company in like the depths of winter, and somebody like brutally murdered it and left it outside of like a mysterious like ancient structure, I would lose my shit. Yeah. Like I would fucking wreak havoc on that camp until I found who did it and punished the shit out of them.
You'd
know?
like Citizen Kane, like the inside of every cabin. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
I
just
would.
like throwing dressers and shit.
I would.
yeah,
And it's like
I know you would.
it's like we don't like the person whose cat is like butchered, like
We don't get
never
close
see-
up. We don't get a mid shot. We don't get anything. Yeah,
We don't
it's
even
just
see that character be like, "No, my cat," you know, like there's
fuck,
nothing.
like my cat. Yeah,
and then it's just like, and then it's just moving on to the next thing.
yeah. And like that's the thing of it. Like I like dry clinical stuff. I've mentioned this before, but like Star Trek knows to do that. Like Star Trek is really good about like incorporating that kind of drama. Like, and I mean like OG Star Trek and Next Gen, like of course, but someone's cat goes missing or whatever else like that, you best believe we're gonna get like a close up
Yeah.
of their reactions to that and their concerns.
Well, yeah, I mean, it like you can't connect with any of these characters at all because they're all pretty emotionless, except for the one dude who's angry all the time who keeps hitting the fridge.
Just hitting stuff. Yeah.
Like,
well,
we
the
get-
fridge especially.
He gets mad
Particularly,
when
yeah.
the guy is throwing a ball.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of like rage problems, and you know, like spoilers, like he towards the end, like he just sort of goes through all the cabins, just like shooting everybody.
Which is awesome. That's the best sequence in the film.
It's very well done, but we can talk about that. But like the number of times like they're having an argument about like how to approach something, or like something weird's going on, and he just like slaps the fridge. Like he's always like standing next to the fridge. Like we turned it into a running joke while watching this movie.
It was
because
funny.
He keeps hitting the fridge.
He did it twice
It's the same
early
character.
on. Yeah, he did it twice early on, and then there's another scene where he kicks like the cabinet next to the fridge, and then T's like, "Damn, it's a shame he didn't hit the fridge," and then he hit the fridge.
And then he hit the fridge. There's one scene where he hits the fridge twice in the same scene.
Sure.
When he's like standing guard outside one of the dudes who's lost his mind's room later with the gun, it's in the same room as the fridge, and we're like, is he gonna shoot the fridge?
And that's his final act of vengeance.
The ultimate culmination. He spent this whole movie beating up this fridge. Is he gonna shoot it?
Or is the fridge gonna shoot him? We don't know.
Well, unfortunately, neither.
But here's what's kind of a bummer is that whole aspect that we've made a joke out of this guy hitting a fridge is probably like the best bit of like character building, because it's sort of what made me remember his character and like like not pee into him, but key into him. I'm sorry, I had a few White Claws, but you can leave that in, I don't care. But we've really keyed into this character because like he's hit the fridges. But if you think about the other characters, like there's a guy who looks kind of like Kurt Russell, and this guy likes to hit fridges. We don't get anything like a character likes to make friendship bracelets, even though he's kind of masculine, or he likes to play chess with one of the other guys or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
there's no like defining character traits.
Like,
that's
one of the character
right,
at some point is playing a video game, but we never get anything else with that.
I mean, look at the thing. Like Kurt Russell at the beginning is like playing a video game on his computer.
He's playing computer chess.
Yeah.
And he gets mad because the computer beats him, and he dumps his drink. He opens up the computer and dumps his drink to short it out. And yeah, we get what I can only assume is yet another nod to The Thing, is that character playing that excruciatingly shitty looking game on
It was
his...
Newgrounds. You said it's like, oh shit, he's on Newgrounds.
Like, oh, my man's on Newgrounds. But he's playing this like super shitty looking game on his laptop, and he loses, and he goes, oh, god damn it, and he just slams the laptop closed. I guess, is that supposed to be like
a reference?
Kurt Russell
Probably.
like getting mad at losing a game that he's playing?
What else would it be? Because it's not really character building. Because like pouring your whiskey over a computer to just like short it out, like you're so pissed. It says so much about Kurt Russell's character. Like it says like he's not willing to put up with anything. He's willing to just salt the earth, which is great because later he gets a flamethrower put into his hands, and it's super gratifying because we've already been told what he's going to do with that flamethrower in that scene, where like he pours whiskey on his computer. Also, it's whiskey. Like it says so much, you know.
And he doesn't yell or like curse the computer or anything.
Yeah,
He just sort of like stoically, like he loses, opens up the hatch, grabs his drink,
methodically almost,
pours it in there, closes it as the computer's shorting out, and gets up and leaves.
leaves.
You know, like he doesn't rage. It's like, yeah, that kind of like little thing tells you so much of what you need to know about his character as the introduction that like sets him apart from these other characters. And like, the guy who keeps hitting the fridge in this movie is like the angriest one, but all these characters are like kind of just angry.
Yeah, well,
Like,
the film.
that's kind of like when they're not being clinical, they're angry. That's like the depth. It's like they're either talking science-y anthropology stuff, or they're briefly shouting at one another.
Well, there is a third phase too, because you do have characters losing their minds.
Yes.
That's true. And then going crazy.
Which I will say, like, the acting of people losing their mind in this movie,
we got a lot to cover on that front. But
think
before we do,
pretty good.
yeah, because I agree. I would definitely want to get into that and hear your take on that. But when it comes to like the anger in this movie, I see this a lot, like when we're watching like bad movie nights, like in the Dread XP Discord and like other stuff, which is where movies, basically like the writer, you can like actively see the writer saying to themselves, this is where drama happens in a movie, and so they just have characters shout at each other, and it doesn't reflect what people would necessarily do in that situation, or if it is, it's what a dumb character would do in that situation. Like, it doesn't make the characters relatable, and it doesn't reflect like true drama. Like, even if it's something legitimate, I think the best example is like after they have to like cut the guy's arm off, the characters are like, again, it's like a wide shot, shoulder height. The characters are all standing around, and the one character was up the Kurt Russell character who came up to survey their surveillance, like make sure that like everything is running and whatever, and see if they can get them more funding and whatnot. Is kind of gives them crap about like not having equipment for cauterizing a wound when it like to be amputated, when they're not so far from society where like they wouldn't have that equipment. They would send someone back to a real hospital long before like they need to have something cauterized. They're not in the Antarctic, right? Like they're in the Arctic. They have
a helicopter that brings them like weekly supply drops. Like, I mean, the radio goes down, or it doesn't really, but for some reason their transmissions aren't getting out. So like the helicopter,
they've been cut off.
Right? So yeah, exactly. You're 100% right. Like, they're in a position where like they have like a little triage station set up to like to treat injuries and stuff until they can get somebody to a hospital, but they're not equipped for full limb amputations, because why would they be? If it got to a point like where something needed to be amputated, they'd call in an emergency chopper to come in and airlift somebody out of there. You know, so yeah, for Michael McDonald to be like,
no relation.
For Michael McDonald to be like you cauterized his arm with a shovel. You're not prepared. It's like, well, yeah, we didn't think fucking unearthing this.
They're at a dig site.
Yeah, these old artifacts would unleash.
They weren't planning to do any amputations.
Like an alien virus.
Like, yeah, it's 2014. Yeah, right. Like in the modern world, even like at range from the modern world, like they have like enough equipment to deal with that sort of thing, but not. Of course, they're not like expecting to have to amputate somebody. Like they brought limes. Like, you know, like they're not going to deal with scurvy. Like they know what to do with that. They have hired a modern chef. So yeah, it's weird that conversation happens.
The doctor has antibiotics and Xanax and sleeping
which
pills.
He regularly gives to people.
Yeah, they've got drugs. You know, like if somebody gets injured, they can triage it until they can get them to a real hospital. But
exactly. But instead, and here's the thing that I find a bummer too, is that in that scene, there could have still been shouting and stuff, but it should have been about how in the previous sequence, the arm that they amputated was amputated because it was writhing with weird tentacle bullshit going on inside of it. Mm-hmm. And like in The Thing, we get this wonderful sequence where the characters are all standing around being like, yo, there's some alien shit going on. We need a test for this alien shit. Yeah. And all the characters are brought together for it's a brief moment.
They do it immediately.
But like they come together and like they realize that even in that worst scenario where people are going crazy, and that's what everyone fucking misses about The Thing. I think like when writers talk about it amorously, like what folks really fucking forget about The Thing is that there is camaraderie in that movie, because there has to be. Yeah. Because if there isn't that camaraderie, when it all falls apart, it doesn't mean anything. And this movie starts there. And like they're always shouting at each other. They're always doing whatever. But it's like you have to have them together to like you have to have the sacredness of them coming together and working together for the profane to happen, for that to be separated and for it to mean something.
Having one introductory shot of them playing cards is not enough. Essentially, like no, that's correct. About all we get of that.
Yeah, that's a portrait. Like it's not. Yeah, like
well, and to circle back to the arm amputation thing, we do eventually get a scene where like the doctor is like revealing the results of the tests he's run on the arm and like what's happening to them, like this weird bacteria or a virus is doing, but that should have come right after the arm amputation scene. Instead, it takes place several scenes later.
Also days later, like according to the chronology.
A full week later, because throughout the movie it shows like title cards of like the date, so like we can see time pat. The whole movie is over the course of like just over a month. But like that, the scene where they're discussing like the disease or whatever that's infecting them is a full week in the film's chronology after the arm is amputated. And it's like, it feels like they're circling around back to that. Whereas, like you said, in that scene where they cut his arm off, like we can see there's like things moving under the skin. Like it's like growing. Like
This looks dope.
yeah.
I wish we
Dread
got a
movie.
close-up of
I wish we got a close up of that too.
Well, it
There's-
looked a little rubbery when they cut it off, but I kind of like that about it. Like, that's not even a critique. Like, I thought it was really fun. Like, that whole scene, like, yeah, like the practicals, like, whoever's making the practicals.
there's a lot of good effects in this movie, and to give the film like a point of legitimate praise, I think the one case where I think sort of the clinical nature of the filmmaking is actually really effective is how it deals with the violence. It doesn't forecast any of it.
It takes
Yeah,
you by
well said.
surprise.
It just happens. Yeah, like the dude getting his arm cut off is a moment like that, but also like a couple of scenes later where dude just walks into the other guy's cabin and he's like mid-sentence talking to him, and he looks over and it's just like a smash cut, and the guy's sitting there at the table with a knife and he sawed off his own hand, and there's like no music sting or anything. It's just like he looks over, the camera cuts to it, it's like, what the fuck? Like, it's
There's
so
no setup.
there's no foreshadowing of it. There's no like sort of like creepy atmospheric buildup. It's just like, Jesus. And
Well, it does that regularly. Even the first like event quote that happens in the movie when the guy like barfs like black fluid, like
Yeah.
he just does it.
It
like,
just happens,
It just
yeah.
happens, and then it's over, and no one really like looks at it or thinks about it or puts
and then
thought.
we cut to a week later
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, a week later, and like that was really odd. Like, that's when I was first kind of keyed in a little bit, because first off, it was like the first thing to happen in like a while in the movie, if anything, which I don't mind per se. Like, I actually really like how like the first half of this movie, like the clinicalness of it, like I think would have been kind of cool if like it had been like the characters had been made a little bit more likable and
more happen.
yeah, a little something. Or like if the writing, I think, had played up a little bit more towards the latter half. But anyway, with that sequence, this is another example of like this character, like they're just having a conversation, then suddenly this guy just vomits black fluid onto the table, and is it blood? No, because the character, like, you think it's blood because like it's like a fluid.
It's like dark fluid, and again, no close up.
No close ups.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of, it looks like blood, but the characters don't treat it like he just threw up
No,
blood.
because if like you're in like an isolated area and someone in your small party is like starts vomiting blood, I would immediately get away from it. It's like, holy shit, is this like a hot zone? Like, what the fuck is going on, right? Like, something is like does this guy have Ebola? Does this guy have like some new virus, which he does, or like what is going on? But like the characters instead say like, what did you eat today? And he says like the same thing y'all had, you know. And it's like, well, okay, is it coffee? Is he just like, did he just vomit his coffee?
Which is why we came to the conclusion that it's not blood that he vomited up. It's just some sort of like dark liquid.
It'd have to be,
because
like, that's just not how the character should have reacted
If it's
to
blood,
it.
then
Yeah.
it's not how they would have
Well, the
reacted.
fact
Yeah.
that they immediately follow it with a date card for like a week later, and
Yeah.
we see the doctor follow up with the guy, and he talks about how he still feels like shit and
Yeah.
hasn't slept. It kind of undercuts the urgency of that scene.
Yeah.
Like that scene where he's vomiting blood feels very in the moment and worrisome, and
Yeah.
they immediately cut it, and then they're like, it wasn't that big of a deal.
I thought that like when he first like stops and he vomits on the table, it's like, oh shit, they're doing an alien chest burster scene.
Yeah.
That's the direction I thought they were going to go with it. And instead, like, it's just, okay, 1 week later, he's still kind of sick, and that's it. And it's like, okay,
I will
cool,
say
you know,
this
that's
kind of
fine, but
brings up a larger issue with kind of the date cards, because the date cards are something I think that would work really well in, like you said, a novella. However, in this movie, I think a lot of times it feels like they undercut the urgency of things going on
Totally.
because things happen and suddenly we get a date card that jumps several days forward, and it feels like, oh, I guess those things just fizzled out.
Well, and not only that, it also kind of introduces, I'm assuming inadvertently, a continuity thing too, because like after the supply drop is 3 days late, when they start to realize something's wrong, they're like putting fuel into the generator, and one of them says how long will our supplies last? And one guy says maybe 2 weeks at the most. And then the rest of the movie is over the course of a full month.
Yeah, and it's
And we never see them like scrounging for food or
that's
doing
the thing,
anything
like
like
people
that,
are
or
dying off,
starving.
so there's less mouths to feed, but at the same time you don't have as
Not
much of a
enough
sense
of
of
a rate.
dread, because like that's not an issue whatsoever that's thought about.
or
Well,
shown.
I don't think there's any reason for like such a focus on the passage of time in this movie anyway. I think it would be better served if we don't know how much time is passing. If we don't know like how long
have we been on this rock?
Right, exactly.
4 months, 2 days.
I mean,
Help me to
even
recollect.
cutting night to day and back to night, like we're getting that visually.
We know that time is passing,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like the dates don't add anything.
No, if
There's
anything,
not-
they take things away from it.
there's not like a ticking clock or anything. It doesn't feel like a specific passing of time is like important for like the supernatural events that's happening, that like, ooh, after a week this happens, and
Or
after 2 weeks, ooh, this happens, you know.
the true Arctic winter is coming, and
Right.
the true cold is,
30 days of night is coming.
But
Yeah, I think they could just remove the
Yeah.
the title cards entirely. We should talk about the deer god.
yes,
Yeah.
Because we haven't mentioned that at all.
we've referred to a lot of movies. I think this one came out the same year, and that's The Blackcoat's Daughter. That's probably the closest comparison I could find, because The Blackcoat's Daughter features a guy in a bunny suit, and like that sort of represents Satan that's talking to this girl.
You're
And
thinking of Donnie Darko, Mike.
Yeah.
no,
We never see the figure in the Blackcoat's Daughter. It's always just like whenever there is a figure, it's out of focus. It's kind of like a robed figure.
but
In
it's
one-
got like rabbit ears.
It's got like donkey ears in one shot towards the
Yeah,
end.
that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying is like it's super minimal.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
and
Sure.
it's like that. It's like maybe it's a rabbit, maybe it's a donkey. I don't know. It's kind of animalistic, but it looks loosely like a children's doll at like full scale. And like it's fucking spooky. Like The Blackcoat's Daughter is a fucking horrifying film.
It's a spooky movie. I
Yeah.
love Blackcoat's Daughter.
The creature in this one kind of reminded me of The Ritual in some ways.
which I still need to watch
Just
and read.
kind of shrouded in darkness. You see antlers vaguely.
Frankly, I wish we had seen less in this movie.
Yeah.
Because we do see the entity a few times, always from a distance, like a long distance, or in thick darkness, because you can tell even then that the prop is not so good. But it is literally just a deer standing on its hind legs, which I think could be scary if it didn't look so derpy. You know what I
I found it
mean?
to be kind of spooky, like in a couple of the shots.
Conceptually, I think it's kind of spooky, and like some of the shots where like you can barely see it, like Ben said, where you can just kind of see like the antlers with like some light sort of playing off the
Tell me what you
silhouette.
see.
That kind of stuff works better, but there, especially towards the end, like there's like right at the very end, there's just like an extreme like long shot from a distance of it just like standing like out in the woods, and it's like that looks like a puppet, because it was.
Yeah. What? Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, because like the thing that really Visually, I didn't have so many problems with it. I don't mind it looking like a puppet. What I just would have preferred is like if it was filmed like with like better lighting and like at a better angle.
Show less of it.
But what really kind of killed it for me was the voice. Like,
really, I'm the opposite. I think I would have liked to see much less of it, but I didn't mind it talking to people.
I liked the voice.
I thought the voice was kind of
liked
cool.
it. I don't know if I would call it cool. I got like a lot of joy out of it, but to me it didn't have like any really like ambience put on it or anything else like that. So it just sort of sounded like a person going like, I am the beast. Listen to the voice of the mountains.
The vocal processing could have used some work.
Yeah.
It does sound a little bit like some Demi Lich.
I was about to say,
it sounds
very
like
belchy.
Yeah, it sounds like Demi Lich a little bit, but I think it's kind of cool. Like I think
kind of
that
cool. It's not super fucking cool though. Like I was saying, it's like it's kind of cool.
The voice was almost there for me. I mostly liked it. I think it could have used something a little bit extra in the vocal processing, like you said, to give it like, I feel like it needed like a sense of like depth, sort of like, you know, something, and I don't mean depth and like pitch because it's very deep in pitch, but yeah, it needed
it's kind of
reverb
froggy
to make it feel a little more ethereal.
Yes.
Bigger, yeah,
because like it's in their minds. It's like, and it's supposed to be like coming into ours, and again too, like for this premise. That premise on paper, like if I read this, I would say, yeah, it's entering their minds. It's trying to like, it's the dark that's like slowly creeping in. It's just like this weird astral entity that's like changing their brains on a cellular level and trying to like essentially like reach them through like weird like neural growth. Like that is so fucking cool, but it's a very celestial ambient thing. Like you like and it's abstract and it's artistic and it needs some cinematography, like, and it needs some like
which is why it's fucking hokey that it's just a deer standing on its hind legs, you know what I mean?
And again, you can do that with a degree of flatness, and like I appreciate the directness of it. I'm not saying like do like swirly shots of muddy water or whatever else like that, like Hagazusa does. Like I just need like those shots of the deer to be like a little more shrouded.
Give the impression,
a little more intent.
Give the impression of a deer. Don't just be a deer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like,
yeah.
I think that's well because one of the things they talk about a lot that we don't see. They talk about is like on these artifacts they're looking at. There's all these kinds of like picts and stuff of like animal gods and like this sort of pervasive like deer god that like we're seeing a lot. We see, and they're talking about they see a lot of like images of people with limbs removed and stuff like that, you know, which we see, and it's like this is all very cool. I like this, but again, it's like especially with the actual entity or god or whatever. Hint at that, give us a silhouette, you know, let us see the antlers a little bit, but don't just be a deer, you know, don't just be a deer standing up. You know what I mean? It feels like it sort of detracts from like the sort of like astral nature of it. Well, because like Michael McDonald, I refuse to call him Kurt Russell. Michael McDonald at the end, you know, runs off to get help, and he meets the god or whatever in the woods. And, you know, it has this monologue about like, oh, when an animal looks up into the night sky, it only sees points of light. When a human does, they see stars and galaxies and billions of planets. Like, what do you think I see? Were you there when I created the stars? When I created time? And it's like, this is cool.
It is cool.
This is cool, but then it'll cut to a wide shot of just a deer standing up on its hind legs and be like, this is God?
Yeah, and like if I was reading this, my mind would be sent in so many directions.
That's again, that's my point.
Yep.
Like it's just
that's
like our buddy Nick here I think he's got some really cool ideas, but it doesn't feel like he quite has the vision to present them visually. And I think that it's like, yeah, if this was like a 100-page novella or something, I would get a huge kick out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
I think there's a lot of really cool ideas and concepts. It's just the execution is so sterile and just like kind of uninteresting that like
clinical's the word.
it removes the sense of like wonder for me for a
Yeah.
lot of it, where it's like if I had my imagination to fill in the gaps, it's like, whoa, this shit is really fucking awesome.
Yeah. And I will say, like, even having the goofy deer, like, thinking about this being kind of just completely in their mind and being
Right.
only what they could, convey visually is a cool concept. And, like, you could do fun stuff with that if you did close-ups. You could
Yeah.
do, shifting things within the deer itself, But, again, you get none
And
of that.
it's the thing about it is like none of what we're asking for requires more budget.
Yeah.
It just requires a little bit more creativity and like the presentation.
Yeah.
You
I will say, on the positive, I do want to talk a little bit about people going mad in this movie, because I think that's one of the examples of a good bit of texture in this movie.
It definitely does it better than Sea Fever, which I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Whereas like Sea Fever, like it has a guy like take off his shirt at one point and try and jump off a boat, and that's about it. Whereas this film, like, yeah, we get some descents into madness. So
Yeah.
please, after you, Ben.
Well, I was gonna say, like, the character who ends up kind of killing one of the other guys who had already, cut off his...
It was the dude who'd gotten his
arm?
it was the dude who'd gotten his arm cut off, because the dude who cuts off his own hand is also the one who shoots himself.
Yeah,
which is
and-
another great example of like the film totally burying the lead and just sort of like hard cutting to a guy with like his brains splattered all over the wall, in a way that I really liked.
Yeah, and this movie, well, in that scene, they kind of show up after the fact and find him, bloody with a weapon, and he
Standing over him with an axe.
yeah, and he kind of just rambles his way into explaining it. He's saying like what he did specifically in a lot of detail, slitting his wrists and neck and trying to stop his heart, but not being able
Because
to.
he was in pain, but he couldn't. I couldn't stop his heart. I couldn't kill him. Like he couldn't die.
Yeah, and that paired with, him hearing the voice of this thing. I thought that all was really effective.
I did too.
And it was kind of the creepiest stuff of the film. If you ask me.
I like when the corpse starts talking to Michael McDonald.
Yeah.
And it's like there's like a subtle, very, very subtle practical effect there where like his head is, from the angle it's shot, like his head is kind of turned towards him, and like you can see his neck, and there's like something's like sort of moving in his neck a little bit. It's like very, very, very subtle. And I liked that a lot. And
Yeah,
then Michael
super
McDonald grabs the gun and like bashes its skull in, because like, the corpse was talking to me.
I love that.
Yeah,
and he's sort of put in a very similar position as to the guy from earlier who killed the.
Well, yeah, because he's been like the very like the voice of reason, So like his little moment of madness is like interesting, but then again, like nothing really comes of that. I think that one of the things that another thing that deflates the scene where he encounters the deer god out in the woods is that he responds to the entity's like soliloquy. He's like, "Where were you? Or were you there when I created the stars?" No. Were you there when I created time? When I created the earth? No. I didn't do anything to you. I'm just trying to get out of here. It's just like
I mean, I'm just trying to live, dog.
it's like it's so like not the the I think appropriate response to like what he's experiencing. It's just kind of like they're building like this cool little bit of atmosphere in a largely atmosphereless film, and then it's just like, no, just lets the little bit of air out of that balloon that they were blowing up a bit.
The one other scene I want to talk about is probably the most atmospheric, artistically done sequence of the film, and that's the scene where the rageful guy finally snaps, and we get this amazing long take of him going through and killing several people. And it's really well done. Like,
really is.
there's a lot of
a great wonder.
practicals that are done.
And
a lot
also
of cool
like
effects.
in post, some shots that look really good too. Like when he like shoots a couple of those guys in the face, or like there's one where a guy's like lower down and he puts his hand up and he shoots through his hand and into his head.
Yeah.
like it's clear, it's done in post, and like you can tell, but like for a film of this like production level and
It's
value,
quick.
like it looks good.
It's quick, yeah. It looks
yeah,
good.
like it looks like quite serviceable and fine. Like I was quite pleased with all of that.
What's cool about it too is like, again, it's all done in one long single take as he goes to like a couple of the cabins and like busts into these dudes' bedrooms and shoots them and stuff. But then he leaves one and he's walking back out, sort of across the courtyard or whatever. And then you hear a gunshot and he goes down. And in the same take, the camera then goes down along the path over to the other guy who has gotten a gun, who has shot him. And then the camera kind of moves around and starts following him as they're like sort of shooting at each other.
And they're exchanging shots in a way that films rarely do. Like action sequences rarely do. Like so often in films, like when a guy has been shot, like that's the end of the fight. And it's really gratifying to see like people kind of exchanging shots with each other and still going. It felt good. It felt
they've been
really
hit
good.
a couple of times, but it's like they're still moving, like because there's some adrenaline, like it feels.
So they're missing shots. It feels sloppy,
more,
like in a real way.
Yeah, it feels more realistic, and it's like that's another
love that
example.
scene, yeah.
That's another example of like just like with all the other instances of violence in this movie, where like the sort of like clinical, more scientific like approach to it is really effective, and it's like I think that stuff is good for violence because it makes it more like raw and gruesome and sort of like forces you to confront it in a way that like a lot of cinema doesn't, because it like makes it more cartoony or whatever. But I wish that was
Or
mixed.
heightened.
I wish that was mixed with some more like artistic flourishes in other parts of the movie. I feel like that's what it's missing. Like if you want to make the violence cold and clinical, like that's an effective tactic in film. I
mean,
think. But
build it, pair it with characters that have distinguishing characteristics.
yeah,
I think
make me care when some guy gets shot in the head.
Yeah, I think that shootout would have had a lot more oomph to it if like those characters meant a lot to us. Like
I agree.
those two characters are probably the most developed characters in the movie, but still that's a very low bar.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all I had to say on this movie.
I have one last thing. Same character, the rage guy who goes around shooting everybody is the same guy who was like hitting the fridge. I do want to mention the giggles we got out of that one sequence where a guy's like walking back to the main area from the site, and we see our rage character chopping wood.
Yeah.
And instead of like normally just like chopping wood, he's out there, he's chopping wood because he's our rage character with rage issues.
He's
every time he's chopping wood, he's like, "Ah!" Graham, and he hits the wood. It's just, "Ah!" And it's it's almost like an anime shout where it's like Hydeken, and we're like kind of like joking about that in the background.
Ryuken.
Yeah, it's like Rasengan, and he's like hitting the fucking he's like chopping the wood, and it's like, and then it cuts to this other character as he's walking up, and you hear him still in the background,
Just like way off in the distance.
Swack.
Like, that's what's funny about it.
Yeah, we got to laugh at him.
It's like him being so frustrated at like his inability to act on any of the crazy shit that's happening, that all he can do is just scream and chop wood. It's like, okay, that's fine in and of itself, but it is pretty funny to have like this long take of like following a different character like walking from one location to another, and just like off in the distance you just hear,
well, like the other character doesn't acknowledge it either.
No,
like it's just weird. Yeah, it's just kind of like an odd like way.
One thing I do want to compliment this movie on is from a technical perspective. I think the audio quality is very good.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a whole lot in terms of like sound design or music.
No, it's probably just like lavalier mics all around.
But a lot of this is shot on location. Like I did see that they were like living in these cabins where they were shooting like for a period of time.
Sure.
And like they're out in the woods, and it's the far north, so like it's cold and wind
Oh my
is
God,
like
dude, the bane of my existence.
Yeah, like any audio guy's like worst nightmare when shooting outside is the fucking wind. And throughout this movie they managed to maintain very consistent good audio quality. If they are doing ADR in any of the external scenes, it's good enough that it's seamless.
Yeah.
So either they're getting
which is more than I can say for Morbius.
Either they're getting very good on location audio quality, which if they are, impressive, or they're doing very, very high quality ADR, which if they are, impressive.
Yeah, I mean, like
either way,
the distant screaming is a great example of good sound design.
No,
right?
it's true. Like as funny as
that
it
was
is.
Definitely done in post.
Yeah,
sure, totally.
Oh yeah, and like it does sound like he's screaming in the distance. It's just that the effect is that it's comedic instead. I think I know exactly what I'm going to give this movie. How do y'all feel?
Well, then go for it.
I'm going to go for it then. Yeah, I'm going to give this movie a. It's been a while since I've gone first. Thank you. I think an easy 3. Like 3 out of 5. It is. I'm going to give it. I definitely like. There have been a lot of movies where I've been kind of disappointed with them, and I've given them a 2.5. I think this is a solid 3. Like I'm not super bitter at this movie. Like that's one thing I'll say about it compared to Sea Fever. Sea Fever left me kind of bitter. Like I was really
Sea Fever kind of pissed me off.
Yeah, like outright. Yeah, like, and it's because of like what it could have been. Right, it was The Thing at Sea. You know, we've talked about it before, but that was in like one of our year-end catch-ups, I think, for 2019.
I think it was a mid-year catch-up.
Yeah, and you're right, it was a mid-year, and but this film, like, I think it did get past that. I am bummed out because that concept of like, oh my God, like it's turning their brains into cephalopod, you know, like cells or whatever, is extremely cool to me because there are a lot of really fun theories, like dumb, like conspiracy-esque level theories of how like cephalopods, like their genetic structure is so different from like anything else biologically that they are aliens.
I don't think that's conspiracy theory. I think there's a fair amount of scientific evidence to suggest that I mean, they're not like recent aliens, but that like the simple like single-celled life forms that octopi evolved from could have come to Earth after life had already developed, like on an asteroid. What is that panspermia? Is that what that theory is?
Damn, I think that's how I identify as panspermia. Yeah,
panspermia. I think that's what it is when the theory that life comes to Earth in like microbiotic form from an asteroid. Something like that. I don't know.
Very cool. That would make sense. But yeah, that sort of premise, and I think playing with that, I would have definitely liked to have seen more of that.
Use some more tentacles.
But where I feel like Sea Fever, like it definitely, and like there's a good start on that. You know, like they do. You know, with the guy's arm.
The
like,
bubbling arm is something, but yeah, then there's nothing ever really comes of that.
Yeah.
And they kind of tell us about it.
And,
but...
you know, even if it had been, like, bad puppetry, I would have been there for that. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, like, you know, like something writhing under their skin that is them. You know, like that's the cool thing is like the parasite is like it's their bodies, you know, changing, and like that would have been cool to see more of because like that's why it's affecting their brains too. Like their brains are shifting as well, and yeah, there's an extremely cool ideas there, but I don't feel like I feel like that idea could still be done. Like in a movie, like I don't feel like this movie is like there have been times in the past where I'm like, well, you had your chance and that's it, like we're never gonna see that again, you know, like, but I don't feel that way about this movie. So like I feel like, yeah, solid 3, nothing too high, nothing too low, not too hard, not too soft, boys to men, solid 3.
I am in full agreement. I think this is definitely a 3 out of 5 movie. I will say
I'm glad we watched it.
that, I think this movie is much stronger in concept than execution. And I think Nick S. is a much stronger writer than he is a director.
Did he write it?
Yes.
Yeah, he did. Which, you know, maybe in the future, you know, he'll grow over time if he continues directing movies.
Sure. Plenty of room.
But yeah, I think overall, like, this movie was all right. It was all right.
Yeah, that's going to be a ditto from me. 3 out of 5 feels just right. Lot of interesting stuff conceptually, but I feel like this movie would have benefited greatly from a different director. You know, somebody who maybe had a little bit stronger sense of the medium of film, because I think, you know, like we've talked about, the ideas, the writing, like there's definitely something there. There's a lot of really cool, interesting, spooky concepts, and a lot of like the exposition and dialogue is not bad, you know? Like there's a lot of cool stuff there, but there needs, if it's going to be translated into a visual medium, there needs to be something like to engage the viewer more. Otherwise, you know, just publish a short story, you know. So yeah, well, I mean, that's unanimous 3 out of 5 for Black Mountain Side. Definitely an interesting little movie.
Did you
that I would not have seen otherwise.
Did you mention that mountain and side are 2 words?
No, I didn't. Okay, thank you for reminding me. That has been driving me fucking crazy. It's like the nitpickiest of nitpicks.
It's super nitpicky. I'm glad we're mentioning this after we've already rated the movie,
the
frankly.
nitpickiest of nitpicks,
But it
like,
does need mentioning.
From the moment this film was brought to my attention, the fact that mountainside is not one word drives me insane. Like it is.
It's like mountainside is a word, right?
Mountainside is totally a word, yes.
Yeah.
Like a single word, mountainside, but it's Black Mountain Side instead of Black Mountainside. I don't know.
Beyond that, it's a good name, though. I like the name a lot, actually, yeah.
It's evocative.
Though I will say, I thought it was kind of weird that I said it as a joke because I liked visually how the shot looked of like the forest with the cabins and the words Black Mountainside in red, like as a shot, like it looked good. The problem is that like the translation is kind of off because like it is Black Mountainside,
but
and you went with red text. Again, like visually it looks good.
Blood on the snow.
It's blood on the snow, etc. I get it, but like I would have probably
Don't
done
be so literal, Cleve.
I know.
Don't be so fucking literal.
What? Yeah. What even is symbolism?
Well, next week is my pick, as
Yes.
I learned only just before we started recording this episode. But that's okay, because I came up with something to choose.
I'm excited.
From our list of sequels. We're going to be talking about Cube 2, Hypercube.
We're hyping. Get hyped for Hypercube.
Which I've never seen.
Same.
I meant, you know, of course, many times have seen the original Cube
Also
and,
same.
and have a lot of appreciation for it. You can listen to our episode on that. But next week we'll be discussing Cube 2.
It's a fun one. I've seen it, and I will say it is a movie with, with
things in it?
going on.
Things are in it? Oh,
As long as
sweet.
it has stuff for us to talk about, that's all I care
It
about.
definitely does.
Hell yeah. Well, then I'm excited.
Awesome.
Do we have predictions from Men last week?
Yes, we do. I almost forgot. Thank you for that. All right, so let's see. First off, for Rotten Tomatoes, I predicted 92. Tease, you predicted 88. And Cleve, you predicted 82.
I think Cleve's got this one.
Currently,
think?
this movie is sitting at 73 on
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes.
Nice.
In terms of
Well,
collective,
not nice. I kind of wish.
in terms of collective rating, I predicted 4.5. TC predicted 4.7, and Cleve, you predicted 5. So I think I won that.
Yeah,
just by lowballing.
Yep. Yep.
And then box office,
Yeah.
I predicted 14 million. TC predicted 30 million. And Cleve, you predicted 40 million.
Oh no, wrong. I definitely didn't get that
Opening weekend was 3.3 million.
Wow. Okay.
So-
that is actually a little bit
I
surprising.
won that as well just by lowballing once
All
again.
right.
So
Men underperformed across the board from what we were expecting.
one. Bit of a shame.
more ways than one.
Yeah.
But also, nice
womp.
your episode on that one. Because, man, kind of checks out. I'm not surprised, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it underperformed for us as well.
Yep.
I still liked
Yes.
it. Anyway, no need to relitigate that. We just talked about it last week. Sponsor time.
this episode of Pod People is brought to you by the letter W. Whoa, 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 what's that sound? It's the letter W.
Fucking Sesame Street
Yeah,
out here.
getting that Sesame Street,
All right.
keeping it Sesame discreet on the
Oh,
street.
damn.
Okay.
Bars.
All right. Spit, King.
My fancy feet are so fleet. I'm keeping it discreet on the Sesame Street,
With the letter W.
beating my meat to the letter W.
Oh, no.
Just like former President George W. Bush.
Oh my god. Oh my god. It all comes together.
Nothing's coming together. But
Except for us.
this episode is coming to an end.
Yes, it is.
So
Well segued.
if you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
I like the show.
You can. Well, have you left us a 5-star rating on Apple
Yeah.
Podcasts?
Yeah.
I don't believe you. You don't have an Apple device.
I used to.
Yeah, but you don't anymore, motherfucker.
Well, I learned.
You can become a supporter of the show at patreon.com/podpeoplepod.
Can you rate us on like the other things that we're on, like Stitcher?
I think
and
they actually added
and
Spotify.
I think on Spotify you can
reviews now.
Hey,
Yeah.
you gotta give us one there, then.
Honestly, I don't know. I use Apple
Wherever
Podcasts
you
for all my
are,
podcasts.
see if you can, because we're all over the place. We're not just on Apple. Well, you know you're listening.
we're
You know
all-
where we are.
You know where you're listening to us.
Review us on Yelp.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, give us a Yelp review.
My fries were cold when they were served to me on this podcast.
The burger was stinky.
Just like this show. But if you want to give the Stinky Show money, you can do it at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. Shout outs to honorary pod boys Sam Simon and Zach Confer. Special shout out to Zach for curating this episode
Yeah.
for us.
Thank you,
and
Zach.
giving us suggesting to us a film that I am fairly confident in saying that none of us would have ever found otherwise.
No, we wouldn't have found it. And frankly, too, like I really liked the pick, and I hopefully that doesn't sound patronizing because I mean that earnestly. Like I said it while we were watching the movie, and that's I wish we watched more movies like this on the podcast.
It's true. He did say that.
I did,
can
and
confirm.
like I think where it's like they're lower budget, they didn't get like the same kind of circulation or renown, and I hope to pick more like that in the future.
Nice to get a deep cut every now and then.
Yeah, and
We
it's
had
like
a lot
well,
to talk about.
Deep cut.
I think
yeah.
what's interesting is like I've come across a lot of those movies in the past year or so, but that has been post year of the Squeakquel, where we've been sort of picking sequels the whole year is our little gimmick deal.
Yeah.
And so like I think after like 2023 is also going to bring a lot of like hopefully a lot more of those. So like keep picking them, Zach. Like
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and I hopefully like our opinions may differ, or hopefully you don't mind our opinions that may differ.
Yeah.
On that front.
Feel free to pick more movies like this in the
honestly,
future,
too, like-
provided we didn't scare you off with our mediocre review.
Well,
of
I've got plenty of
Black
peers like who love horror movies I can't stand, and vice versa. You know, like, and I respect that a lot. So I think it was a great choice, and I mean that earnestly. So thank you.
I definitely appreciated it. Yeah. So again, if you want to be like Zach and Sam, you can do so at patreon.com/podpeoplepod.
Hey, we're small enough that we'll talk to you directly like this too,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
I will hit you up personally.
Yeah, I want to hear more of your thoughts, and too, yeah, keep me apprised. I want to hear more of Zach's thoughts on this movie. I wanted to,
You have access to him too, dog. On
I
Twitter.
don't go on Twitter. Are you kidding?
Speaking of Twitter,
I don't go on that.
you can follow the podcast on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and at letterbox.com/PodPeoplePod.
Yeah, don't be like me. Go on Twitter.
Where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our
Gave
average
up on
ratings
Twitter a
and
while
links.
ago.
And links to those reviews. You can follow me on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake. And if you follow me on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake and you listen to the podcast and you send me a DM, I'll answer it.
And,
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
and if you're somehow not a brand advertising to another brand and just actually a consumer on Twitter, you can find me via Light Arc Studio. That's
On the not active Twitter that
yeah,
you don't use.
that I don't really use that much these days. I will once we have like something important and big to share. But what you can really find me, where you can really find me at, is dreadxp.com, or any of our games under the publisher wing of DreadXP, of which I am working on many right now, of which we have many out. But most importantly, and most recently, as of last 2 weeks ago, according to when this is going to be releasing, the DreadX Collection 5 is out, and there's some really cool games on that. If you like Midsummer, there's a Midsummer-y game. There's a really cool like club-themed game called Resver. Like, there's so many cool games in the 5th DreadX Collection, which I did a lot of the art assets for. One of which being is a really cool poster in the office wall that says "Business, it's good for business," which I was very pleased with. I also did a horror movie, like John Carpenter horror movie poster of the Hang In There cat. That I was pretty pleased with. There's some good art. I did some pretty fun art for that collection, and I would recommend it. It's the DreadX Collection 5. There's some really phenomenal developers worked on that game, and there's some super cool stuff. But anyway, that's it for me.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. And until next time, remember, we're omnipotent, we're omniscient, so why wouldn't we be omnipresent?
Punch your fridge.
You know, that movie, it had a lot of good ideas.
Fuck off.